In lesson 2.2, we're going to work with addition of integers. These are positive and negative numbers. In elementary school, when we had number lines on our desk, if we were going to add, we would move right. And so if we move right for positive numbers, then we would move left for negative numbers. I think this is a little bit confusing when you get to positive and negative numbers. So I'm going to show you what I think is the easiest way to think about this. You're adding numbers with the same sign. In other words, two positive numbers. We know how to do that. If you add two negative numbers, we're just going to add their absolute values and apply the common sign. So if we have 2 negatives and 4 negatives, then we'll have 6 negatives. If we have negative 84 plus negative 28, then we'll have negative 112, I believe. If we have 14 plus 31, we know that that's 45. We know that from elementary school. And if you wanted to check this on your calculator, I have a negative sign. So if I wanted to put in negative 2 plus negative 4, I would put in negative 2 plus negative 4, and that would be negative 6. So on my calculator, I have a sign that looks like this. I have a key that's marked like that. Some of you may have something that looks like this, and it's an opposite key. So you put the number in and it would be positive. If you hit this key, it means negative. If you hit it again, it's positive. You hit it again, it's negative. So that's the way you would control the positive and negative. On our test, there will be part of the test that you will be able to use a calculator on, a part you will not. So when we get to the algebra part, you will be able to use a calculator, but just on adding and working with signed numbers, you will have to know the rules and be able to do these without a calculator. But to check your work, when it's not on the test, then you can use the negative key or the opposite key, depending on what your calculator has. So when you add different signs, the rule, I think, is a little bit confusing. Basically, we'll be doing the same thing, but we're going to be thinking it a little differently. The rule is to add two numbers with different signs, subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value, then apply the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. But I like to think of this as a jar. So these are both positive numbers. So if you put in 2 positive and then put in 4 positive, then in your jar you would have 6 positive. If you had 3 negatives in your jar and added another negative, then you would have 4 negatives. And that's what we did up here at the top. So if you had 2 negatives and you added 4 negatives, now you have 6 negatives. But when you have different signs, there's another aspect that's involved. So if you have a positive and you have a negative, those two cancel each other out and actually have a 0 charge. So when we add 3 positives in our jar and then throw in 2 negatives, these cancel each other out, and we're left with 1 positive. If we have 1 positive and put in 4 negatives, these will cancel the charge out, and we're left with 3 negatives. If we have 5 negatives and add 2 positives, cancel, and we're left with 3 negatives, which is what the rule says. The rule says to subtract the absolute values. 5 minus 2 would be 3. And use the sign of the number that has a greater absolute value, which is negative in this case. So here we have 4 negatives, 5 positives. So 4 pairs will cancel out and we're left with 1 positive. If we have 3 negatives and 1 positive, those cancel out and we're left with 2 negatives. If we have 6 positives and 3 negatives, then these 3 pairs will cancel out and we're left with 3 positives. So this is the way I like to think about it. We don't want to draw these jars on every problem, but when you're adding numbers with different signs, ask yourself, are there more positive or negative? And how many more? So if we looked at this, we would see that we have more positive than how many more? 1. If we looked at these, we would see there's more negatives. How many more? 2 more negatives. Here we look at these, there's more positives. How many more positives? 3. So this is really the way I like to add positive and negative and not worry about absolute values. I mean, it's just simply which are there more of and how many more are there. So the sum of any number and its opposite is 0. So if you have a negative 8 plus a positive 8, these are opposites. One's to the left of 0, 8, and one's to the right of 0, 8. Their sum would be 0. Negative 12 and positive 12 would be 0. Positive 6, negative 6 would be 0. And we'll be using this idea when we get to an algebra lesson later on. When adding 3 or more numbers, like we have here, we can add them in any order. We're going to add the positive numbers and add the negative numbers, and then we're down to what we did earlier on. So here, we can add these negatives. We have 14 negatives and 4 positives. We have more negatives, 10 more negatives, right? Here, we can add the negatives and add the 2 positives. And now we're down to a problem like we did with the jars or with our little technique here. Do we have more negative or positive? It looks like negative, and we have 8 more, right? Okay, so we're going to do some translations. We're going to go from numbers to kind of algebra sort of things. These are the key phrases that signal addition. The sum, that's the answer that you get when you add. It's called the sum. Plus, added to, more than, increased by. The total is also another name for the sum. So if we want to find the total of these numbers, this means we're going to add. So we're going to add negative 8 plus negative 12 plus 16 plus 12, plus negative 4. So right off, I notice that I have negative 12 and a positive 12, so those are going to equal 0, so I don't have to worry about those. So now I'm going to add my negatives. I've got 4 negatives and 8 negatives, which would be negative 12, and we're going to add to it positive 16. So do I have more negative or positive? Positive, and how many more? 4. So we're going to translate to a mathematical expression and simplify, which means to find the answer. We want to find the answer. So 6 added to, negative 6 added to the sum of these two numbers. So if we want to find the sum first, we're going to have to put it in parentheses. 2 and negative 11. So to simplify it and find the answer, we'll have to do what's in parentheses first. We have 11 negatives, 2 positives, so we have more negatives, about negative 9. So we have negative 6 plus negative 9, so we have 15 negatives. Negative 2 more than the total of these 3 numbers. So now we're going to have to add those numbers. We have negative 8 plus negative 10 plus 9. So let's do what's in the brackets first. We have -2 plus, we have 18 negatives and a +9. So when we add these together, we have more negatives. It looks like 9 more negatives. So -2 plus -9 would be 11 negatives. So that's addition. And we'll be practicing that when we go on to 2-3, because we're never really going to subtract. Instead, we're going to change it to addition and add.